Talking with the experts.
Welcome to episode 270 with return guest Minter Dial.
If I say bombs or you allowed snap, that can trigger the PTSD of your experience in Afghanistan. However, we need to thicken up a little bit our skins. And so that's my sort of call to action for the younger. And yet for us, Rose, it's also about being aware of the things that trigger us. And somehow some effort can be made if we know about their situation, how we can bring them in an appropriate manner, because just going all guns blaring is going to bring up the defense mechanisms. And so we've got to find our way to lean into their situation and bring them along. But just saying, you shouldn't be sad. Well, that's not going to help. Or you shouldn't be reacting like that. That's not going to help. We need to go back into the why are you being like that? What is it about this that, and hopefully re-engage with each other. So I mean, this can be on a political level, it can be on a national level, or a city, or a football team.
Are you a non-techie, introverted author, speaker, coach, consultant, or entrepreneur wanting to make an impact through podcasting? In 30 days working one-on-one with you, I can show you how to build authority and credibility for your business. I'm inviting you to shift your thoughts about podcasting and allow yourself to expand into the next level of your life and business by joining the Podcast Wizard 30-day program as I help you take your podcast from idea to launch. Find it at rose-davidson.com under the Work With Me tab.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. And you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And I have a return guest today, and it is Minter Dial. And last time we talked about leadership, and my goodness, it was a fascinating conversation. And today we're actually going to be talking about conversations and how you can make them meaningful. And we'll talk about his book in a little bit later on. Welcome, Minter, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Rose, it's a true pleasure to be back on the show to chat with you. I love your energy.
I love your accent. I still love it. I'm in love with it.
Thank you.
So tell me, what have you been up to since last we spoke?
Well, so my whole industry took it on the chin by not doing conferences anymore. So I really leaned into this idea of talking to the camera. I've equipped myself with lights, a mixing board, 3 different professional microphones, a high density or high resolution camera. And so I've tried to make this little box that we have to speak into a lot more exciting in general. I've been practicing that, having fun, and still doing lots of sports. There's a sport called paddle tennis, which is my thing. And it's finally beginning to pick up in England. It's the fastest growing sport in the world and vying for the Olympics, I think, in 2028. So that's going to be exciting. And the last thing I say is I've been back on the airplane, and I went to see my old rock and roll band that I've seen a couple of hundred times. They're called The Dead. And I went to see The Dead on Halloween.
That would have been creepy.
It was in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Bowl, open air, 20,000 people. And here's the really crazy thing, Rose. On the plane over the Atlantic, the guy 2 rows behind me died. So I really can say I went to see The Dead on Halloween.
That's pretty sad, but and creepy and all those things all at once. Wow.
Exactly.
Oh,
Anyway, And I suppose to keep myself busy, I'm on a new book, Rose. So that keeps me truly excited.
So let's talk about the book.
So Rose, you mentioned at the outset this notion is sort of like meta, a conversation about conversation, or podcasting about podcasts. In this case, I have observed that we are craving meaningfulness, and we are missing deep conversations. The opportunity for us to connect and talk seriously, deeply, personally has been so difficult through the pandemic. We're not physical. We barely know how to touch each other, and we've lost our ability to lean into deep conversations. So even though we may be able to meet in presence, there's this sort of hesitancy which has been stoked by deep divisiveness and a retrenchment within ourselves. As connected as we might think we are deeply disconnected. And that connection is how we gain energy. So the object of my book, which I've called Dialogos for now, which is all about putting meaning, logos, into dialogue and conversation, is to help us re-find an ability to talk meaningfully and let's say skip some of this banter, small talk, how's the weather, and not be able to talk about real things just because it's politically incorrect or a topic that might offend. We've got to get back into it, Rose, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I totally agree. I mean, when I first came to Australia 50 years ago now, I mean, up until about, I don't know, the mid-90s, Australians used to laugh at themselves and, and poke fun at themselves. And now it's so politically incorrect to do that. And, it's such a sad thing because it's a big part of the culture that's been lost because of the PC, that I don't even know where these people come from, to be honest. And why do people get so offended by just the littlest things? It's crazy.
And the challenge is trying to understand that, because you and I were brought up with a saying which went something along the lines of sticks and stones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. May break my bones, but words won't. That's what we were taught by our teachers. That was part of our lingo, and jesting and debating and jousting with words is part of how we develop our brain and connect into it. And what do we really think? And right now we're kind of rolling along on some superficial clouds, a whole brand of narcissism. By the way, not just the young. I think a lot of this sort of narcissism has crept up. And as a result, we've got this epidemic of loneliness that everyone's talking about. Mm. And so we've got to burst the bubble. We've got to go back into some of the the deeper, difficult conversations. And maybe, remember that we're absolutely human, that we are monumentally insignificant, cosmically insignificant.
And very flawed, 99% of us, I think, even 99.9% of us are flawed in some way. And if we can't voice our opinion, what is there? If you have to mind your P's and Q's every time you open your mouth, then what's there to say? You've got no conversation because it's superficial. It doesn't mean anything.
That's exactly right. I kind of link it in with, so 99.9 you mentioned, I think it's 100%. And we want to allow for that wiggle room to believe that there's someone who's perfect. That's not true. Nobody is perfect. We need to accept not only our imperfections, but our finitude. And so we don't want to get hurt by words, but at the other end of the scale, if you will, as far as our lives are concerned, we don't want to suffer pain. And we don't want to even talk about death, the fact that we come to an end. And as a result, we're just pushing towards some sort of immortality project, some immortality idea, legacy that allows us to live forever. And it's almost like by not talking about it, by not having pain, by pushing away age, well, we'll live forever. And the idea of life is, it is about the challenge. It's
we
about
never
how
die.
we,
Our souls never die. I mean, our body dies, but I believe our soul lives on forever, and we just go from one life to the next.
there you go. Well, and we also have this moment where in this body that we are, we live during our lives. And the question is, are we prepared to get dirty? And what I mean by that is get our knees in the soil, our finger, underneath our fingers, some dirt, and reconnect into what's gristly and what is truly human.
Yeah, I mean, even with especially my youngest daughter, she is very particular about the words that I use, and I'm pretty blunt when it comes to a conversation, and she gets offended very easily. And I mean my words in the kindest way, but it's just the words that I use. She doesn't understand them, the intention behind them, I suppose. And we just end up fighting all the time.
And I think the challenge is it's naturally, it's a tango. They're not all wrong, and we're not all right about these things, and I'm speaking the same way as you, Rose, because I can recognize PTSD. I mean, I recognize that is a big deal. Yet, if you went and fought in Afghanistan and saw your friend beside you had their head blown off, yeah, I can completely get it. Oh, this word triggered PTSD because of that. Yeah, that can happen. If I say bombs or you allowed snap, yeah, that can trigger the PTSD of your experience in Afghanistan. However, we need to thicken up a little bit our skins. And so that's my sort of call to action for the younger. And yet for us, Rose, it's also about being aware of the things that trigger us. And somehow some effort can be made, if we know about their situation, how we can bring them in an appropriate manner, because just going all guns blaring is going to bring up the defense mechanisms. And so we've got to find our way to lean into their situation and bring them along. But just saying, you shouldn't be sad. Well, that's not going to help. Or you shouldn't be reacting like that. That's not going to help. We need to go back into the why are you being like that? What is it about this that, and hopefully re-engage with each other. So I mean, this can be on a political level, it can be on a national level, or a city, or a football team. You like the Melbourne team and I like the Sydney team. Well, let's talk about what's actually good about the Melbourne team. There's actually a really great player in Melbourne, and who do you like in the Sydney team? Yeah. And if you do that, it's amazing how we'll actually reconnect.
Yeah, we need to, I think we need to get that thicker skin back. People, too many people have thin skins and, easily offended by the most minor of things, infractions, really, aren't they? It's what I've found in the last, 20 years or so. That the skin's got thinner and the feelings get hurt too easily.
And this is, unfortunately for me, really the topic is politics, because what we've done is we've politicized language, and this has crept into the academic spheres. Universities and schools are promoting this, and we're dummying down our language because we don't want to hurt anybody who might have had something somewhere sometime. And as a result, we're really tipping the scales for such a minority of situations that for the majority, they get left behind. And that's what I feel is happened here. We've got a disproportionate amount of effort happening in the media, because it's the way the media likes to roll, and in academics, because that's their environment. And the issue is, if you say anything contrary, we're called out for being extremists.
Yes.
and put out on social media, and then all of a sudden it goes viral and you're canceled, or at least you're in trouble. So the challenge is deep rooted in our societies. Australia you mentioned, but obviously United States is sort of where I think the whole lead is. And there's definitely some good in there. There's Absolutely. We should be aiming for having more women in high positions. We absolutely should have more representation from diverse backgrounds. I mean, I'm all in favor of diversity of mindsets. And so how you do that, having diverse people from different backgrounds is really a great start. And if they look differently, act differently, that's what you want. It helps to create that diversity. So yeah, of course, there's some great things, but we've lost the ability to go back in there and, let's say, criticize the diverse angle. And it gets taken as, well, you're criticizing diversity, or you're criticizing that part of diversity, as opposed to the thought that came out or the action behavior that should be sanctioned by any normal person on any other scale. And that's sort of an example of how we've lost our ability to have proper conversation without being pegged as some kind of, white elitist supremacist, which, as is in my case, could quickly happen and has happened to me, because out of context, that's another issue. We take things out of context and then we put a whole nother spin on that, a filter, which out of context in social media makes you look like a real, gorp.
Yes, absolutely. And it's such a shame, really, that the world's come to this. I mean, the pandemic didn't help because we couldn't actually, meet face to face. It was all done online, and and thankfully for that too, because it's opened up a whole new way of communication. But it's still that close contact with human, another human. The touch, the looking in the eyes, because you can still look in someone's eyes, but it's not quite the same as actually being in the room with them.
100%. I mean, we have pheromones, we have smell indicators, we have our feet twitching, the hands underneath the camera, all these little movements that you can't see as I'm speaking. And, unless I brought my hands up and
you're probably giving me the bird anyway, but never mind.
Let me say it to you straight. So, and what I'm hoping to do with Dialogos, which I'm publishing on a weekly basis, is to spark the conversation and allow us to return, not in a forum where it's all guns blaring at one side or the other, but finding ways for us to re-engage with both sides. And I'm not aiming for the fringe at the far end of either spectrum, but just for the big bulk of us, we've gotten into a situation through fear where we are just pushing ourselves in a corner, socially isolated, initially socially distant. Now we're socially isolated, and I'm hoping, even online, that we can find ways for us to, in a civil manner, debate, listen to one another, and learn from one another.
Yes, listening is a skill that is sadly lacking in people are more wanting to voice rather than listen. I think you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use your ears more than you use your mouth.
One of the things that I've sort of as my theses for Dialogos is our relationship with time. And so on the one hand, we have the more bigger need, because we're so individualistic, to express ourselves. It's how we exist. It's not I think, therefore I am. It's I speak, therefore I am. I get my 2 cents in all the time. But our relationship with time is interesting, because I feel that as soon as you have a time constricted conversation, then this obliges you to punch in to get your thing slotted in. And rather than wait for the other person to finish and then elaborate on what they have just said, it's about, well, just swapping it back into what I want it to be about. And so listening is not just listening and hearing what the other person's saying, but actually is delving into it, and rather than swapping, returning it to be all about me, finding ways to latch into what you're saying and feeling, and then maybe when you do that, you get the mirror happening back to you.
Quite often, though, the mirror's back facing, isn't it? You know, you're trying to have a meaningful conversation with somebody, and the conversation's not it's not reciprocated.
Yeah, they're not listening to what you're saying. They're just sort of glancing, I would say, like, it's reflecting off that mirror, like you're saying. It's just glancing it off and then pop back to what I want to be saying. And yet, I could do something like this. Rose, I see what you just said, and you've got your head tilted, so it makes me think that you're inquisitive, you're engaged in this conversation. Is that accurate? And so just reflecting that, what you observe, as let's say that was a micro idea, but finding ways, especially easier when we are in person, because when we're truncated, I don't even, you don't know if I'm wearing, any trousers or whatever.
You're probably not, because you have to go and play tennis soon.
That's true, but I can tell you I'm bare feet. How about that? That's the truth.
No,
but
no, I've got human feet, but I'll take that.
Exactly. But I'm deeply passionate about this, and what I'm trying to do, Rose, is publish this book in a way that's different than any other book that I've published. And I took let's say, a feather out of the cap of the 19th century writers who used to write chapters and publish them in a weekly manner in newspapers, like Charles Dickens or Hugo, or whoever. And so what I'm trying to do is with rigor, is publish once a week, every Thursday, a chapter, get people to comment, and then if those comments, well, they will naturally influence me, but if I can, somehow use them as the text goes along. And so that there's a sort of ongoing conversation about the conversation, which will end in a book about conversations. And that's my desire to find ways for us to re-engage. And the listening skill, of course, is complicated when you're writing. And as an author who I'm speaking, how do I re-establish my listening skills? And so that's when I get a comment, and some of the comments may not be in my favor or be against what I'm saying. So how do I breathe into those and not take it in a poor way, but look at it as a great way for me to learn and adjust my thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And so where are you publishing these chapters, Minter?
So I decided to use Substack, substack.com, which is a platform that was created in 2017. And it's a really interesting platform if you've never used it, Rose, which tends to try to promote good writing. And the way it does that is that they have editors who will look at the different texts that are being published and promote what they, as a platform, believe to be good writing. They also, and not coincidentally, won't banish people or deplatform people just because of what they wrote. And then the third thing is it's a platform that also allows for subscriptions that are either free, paying, monthly, yearly, or whatever generosity someone might have. And so this is where you can see value. And there, as a platform, they can determine, well, this writer has X% of people who are subscribing for a paid amount. That'll be an indicator that this person seems to have value, is providing value to his or her readers. And then they use that type of data in the background in order to promote different people. So it's a really interesting platform, and I'm still learning. And I find it's difficult to create a community behind a book or this basically a newsletter, if you will. But that's where I'm writing, and I really would encourage anybody who's listening to this to go check out Substack, and you'll find all sorts of really interesting people writing great things. And I'm trying to add my little, pebble to the beach.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's very well worth reading, and so I've taken note of that website, and I'll go and check it out and check out your newsletter and see. how it stacks up against the rest.
There you go. Sub and stack.
Yep, got that. I'll do that. And so, Minter, other than your book, what else? Where else can people find you if they want to talk to you about anything or work with you?
That's very kind, Rose. I have this zany, maybe weird name, which makes it rather simple to find me. minterdial.com is my regular website where I post articles, and my weekly podcasts in English and monthly in French. And otherwise, I'm available on most social media sites with the handle mdial, MDIAL, and always happy to engage in meaningful exchanges.
I know. I love talking to you. You're so engaging.
Oh, that's very kind, Rose. The funny thing is, I'm just having this sort of moment of self-consciousness. I'm talking a lot, and whereas I'm really trying to promote listening a lot.
No, but that's the point. I mean, you know how I run these podcasts. It's all about the guest, and the guest is the focus, and they have something to say. They have either something to sell, something to share, something to teach, and so the floor is always to the guest. I try not to intervene too much because I like to listen and I like to learn.
Well, it's minter.substack.com. That's where I'm writing my dialogos, fostering meaningful conversations. And that's going to be my, let's say, true passion for this entire year. And hopefully come December, I will have written 50 chapters, each of 1,000 to 2,000 words. And so if you're going to go in, bear in mind that they're long form articles on Thursdays, and on Tuesdays, shorter, chippier, hopefully easier to spark a comment. Come and join, and hopefully we can make the world a little bit better if we can have more meaningful conversations.
Absolutely. And I've absolutely enjoyed our conversation once again. And I hope I can get you to come back again next time.
When it's all finished, Rose, that'd be lovely. Thank you so much.
All right, Minter, thank you for your time today. And just as a last few words from you, have you got something that you'd like to share, some words of wisdom or, some quote?
Yeah, my favorite quote is, change is for sure, growth is the option. And so where we are creatures of habit, try to embrace change and look at it as a growing and greater opportunity. And certainly I'm right now as we speak, I'm also, it's the 80th anniversary of two, well, one was in April, one is in May of 1942, events that happened in World War II. And I spent a considerable amount of time in the 90s and the noughties talking to veterans of World War II. And these are individuals who saw things and really, really did suffer pain and difficulty and death, and had such an ability, stiff upper lip, to not need to make it all about them, and had some significantly important values. Sure, there were some bad things, but my goodness, we could do with a little bit more of the values that that generation had. And so the specific reason I mentioned that is that my film called The Lost Ring Home is being shown again on television for the anniversary in the United States on PBS, and maybe on the History Channel down under. I haven't checked, but it's called The Lost Ring Home, and it's a story of the values of the Second World War, and some things we could hopefully remember and reintegrate into society. We shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater about the past.
Exactly. I just watched a series called Gallipoli. It's about obviously the landing and what went wrong and the Anzacs and whatever. And it's so sad. It's just what they went through was absolutely horrendous for just the 7 months that they were there. It was awful. But the values of the people then, I think, yeah, you're right. We should bring some of those values back. I think they're not so old-fashioned that we couldn't live by some of them today, because I think a lot of people could benefit from them.
Amen.
All right, Minter, thank you so much. And I look forward to discussing with you your next topic on our next round.
With pleasure.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.